Having a home bar is pretty cool. It's a great place to entertain guests and practice your skills. But a couple of bottles will only get you so far. Technique is essential when making a cocktail. Otherwise, it would just be a bunch of ingredients thrown into a glass. It's important to understand what you are doing, so you're going to want to have some resources on hand. So guess what? You are going to want some books on cocktails.
No!
So let's work on that home bar library.
No!
It's easy to forget that when the modern cocktail renaissance started back in the 1990s, most recipes and techniques were taught only behind the bar. So everyone developed their own recipes for classic cocktails.
This here's your classic Manhattan made with Worcestershire sauce.
There weren't any really well-compiled books on the subject, and the ones that did exist were hard to find, containing even harder to find ingredients like chartreuse and orange bitters. Now browsing your local bookstore can be overwhelming. My home bar is even filled with copies of reprinted classics, books that specialize on one ingredient, collections from famous bars, the history of specific cocktails, huge tomes that read like a textbook on anything and everything to do with the beverage world, and why the way you shake is so important. But if you're just looking for a few books to get you started or inspired, here are 3 that I recommend you pick up. Ask most bartenders and they will say that no cocktail library is complete without Gaz Regan's The Joy of Mixology. This is more than your average recipe book. It's a textbook for bartenders. There is a ton of technical knowledge in here, and yet it's an easy read, approachable to anyone no matter what level of bartending they are at. This 15th anniversary updated edition fills in the gaps since the book was first published in 2003. It incorporates Gaz's insights on the cocktail revolution and a complete overhaul on the recipe section. Working through over 350 drinks, he separates them into different families based on ingredients, with a complete breakdown on the basics, making them easier to memorize and, when the time comes, reinvent. There's also cocktail history, bartender etiquette, theory of mixology, and foundational principles for behind the bar. This is a fundamental piece of literature for any aspiring bartender or cocktail enthusiast. The Cocktail Codex is a book I wish had been written long ago, and from the team behind Death & Co. no less. Like The Joy of Mixology, it breaks down drinks into easy families. It centers on the 6 root recipes that all cocktails are derived from: Old Fashioned, Martini, Daiquiri, Sidecar, Whiskey Highball, and Flip. It teaches you why those styles work through the concepts of core, balance, and seasoning, and how to use each to create a cocktail. Basically, once you know the formula for, say, a standard daiquiri, that's your 3/4 ounce sour, your 3/4 ounce sweet, 2 ounces of spirit, shaken with ice. You're then able to take that knowledge and create any number of variations of your own. Like the Whiskey Sour, the Gold Rush, or a Cosmo. You aren't going to get any deep dives into spirit histories or tools in this book, but all the information is functional, beautifully illustrated, and located right next to the styles of drinks that commonly use them. Here is a thorough guide to your basic bartending techniques: shaking, stirring, garnishing, and even selecting ice. This is basically the first book I give to all new bartenders and barbacks, which is probably why I don't have a copy of it right now. Seriously, I've bought this book like 4 times. I imagine all my copies are being paid forward to the next generation of bartenders, and that someday they will all be returned to me, one by one, hand-delivered by some grateful, wealthy bar owner. And then I'll be able to ask, who the hell keeps stealing all my books? The bar book's tight focus on mechanics, ingredients, and best practices make it very useful for the new bartender and home enthusiast. He gives solid reasoning behind fresh squeezed juice, his method of making syrups, and a discussion on infusions that has just enough scientific backing without being too in-depth to the casual reader. I like that it doesn't go too deep defining various spirits. It gives the book a tight focus on making well-balanced drinks, and not so much about the brands anyone might have on hand. Now, these are just examples of books that I consider must-haves for my home bar. There are a few more that I just can't live without. So guess what? Here are 3 more that I think will help you and your craft. I love a good story. The joy of this book is hearing about the origins of a lot of your favorite drinks, and the stories behind each of them. In this case, from the people who created them. Drinks include the Espresso Martini, Tommy's Margarita, Old Cuban, and Paper Plane. A common feature of these modern classics? They're usually simple to execute, so the recipes easily translate to the home bar. If you've ever been interested in the detailed process of carbonation, temperature, and acidity, this is your book. Scratch that. This is a book for people who notice 20 pages devoted to ice and get unreasonably excited about it.
No!
Dave takes a more scientific approach to cocktail making here. While certainly not aimed at the casual enthusiast, this is the best collection of advanced cocktail techniques put to paper. When it comes to making drinks that are approachable and interesting, but fundamentally simple and recreatable, Souther is head and shoulders above most. He also calls on notable industry pals for recipe contributions and techniques. I like the part regarding aged eggnog. This is a perfectly balanced collection of history, useful tips, and recipes for anyone wanting to dive more deeply into cocktails. That's just where I would begin, if I had to start my home library over again. Now I have too many books that I reference regularly to do without. Let me know what books you always reach for to help get creative, or to, say, win an argument about how much olive brine goes into a margarita.
I use half an ounce.
It's none. No olive brine goes into a margarita.